Hello, and welcome to part one of this week's podcast. And boy, is it a long day, it felt like. Oh, but finally done with it for today. So, had a good weekend. We were mostly at home, but my brother came over and we played a game of Legion. It's the first one I've gotten to play in well over a year now. So it was a lot of fun. And we got to try out the new rules for the, also, actually, since the last time we both played, uh, they added a couple things and changed it a lot, but we got to play with the new cover system and updated rules for the newer edition. And also, we were playing with the recon rules, which are much, not much smaller, because last time we played it was only 800 points, and the recon is 600, so it's almost the size we had originally played. But yeah, we last played like a year and a half, maybe closer to 2 years ago we had played. And so we each had last time we played, it was 800 points with different scoring, a different scoring system, and with a different uh, kind of format for a lot of the cards, and a lot of the language around the rules has been updated, and some of the tokens have been changed, and so it was just a bit of a back and forth in the rule book trying to figure everything out, but it went pretty smoothly, I think. And so that was with our armies that are using the new campaign rules, or the tours of duty as they're called. And so using those, we're adding more upgrades over time. So we had uh, 600 points each. We each brought 7 units, and we're on a 3 foot by 3 foot board with 3 objectives in the middle. The middle objective was worth 2 points, and the side objectives were each worth 1 point every round. Whoever was controlling them, so whoever had the most units within distance, or within 3 inches, or distance 1/2 is what they call it. But I ended up winning the game on victory points. Uh, I had So you win the game at, I think, 12 victory points, and at the end of round 3, or no, at the end of round 4, I had 12 victory points. Or was it round 3? I don't remember, because we were also using the secondary objective was one of your units got a scanner, and if they were within uh, range 2, which is a foot, of 2 enemy units, you got a point. And I know I got that 2 rounds, and then I got uh, 2 points from the middle, both So that's 6, and then 2 from one side both, 7, 8. So that's then 9, 10. Now that wouldn't have been enough points. So I think it was round 4. Yeah. Yeah, it was round 4 because by the end of it, I had killed 3 of his units, and he had killed 1 of mine. But the very first round of the game, opening round, he almost killed one of my scout units, but then he switched fire to my commander with the people on that side, and so it kind of gave me a bit more breathing room. But it was a ton of fun, and I definitely think I want to do that again. But yeah, we ended up going through the whole thing afterward and assigning all the points, and my commander was the only one who got enough points to level up. So now I have a leveled up commander and then a pretty good amount of experience. But he actually rolled better on the supply points, so he has a little extra supply to use, and he got supply points from his campaign objective, and I just got experience from mine. So I think he actually got more in terms of long term, because I think we didn't do the medevac, and I think we both had a medevac ready, and so he could have used that on one of his 2 units, because he had 3 units defeated, but 2 of them escaped any long-term negative effects. They just got an experience, and 1 of them got a negative effect. But we forgot about the medevac rules, which were that you can give, or you can exempt 1 unit from a negative effect, or from rolling for a negative effect. And so that would have been, I think that would have made a difference. So I'll have to see what he wants to do, but either we'll just say he could use his medevac to cancel it, since he would have, if we would have remembered it, might have affected it, or he could just use his supply points to buy the aid request, which removes a negative from an allied unit, because he has a few extra supply points. But either way, I think long term, the negatives are interesting, but you're going to be able to negate mostly, it seems, because just for playing, there was enough of an effect on supply points to kind of give you the ability to negate that. But it was a very big landslide of a game, because I was just kind of got a better position, and I held my 2 anti-tank units for the very end of deployment, and he deployed his tank before them. So he deployed an ATST, and then I deployed a spider droid with an ion cannon and a squad of B1s, of 14 B1s with a rocket launcher. And so that kind of took care of his ATST, and also the ion shot from that kept it from rolling, or he didn't manage to roll to remove the ion ever at the start of any of the turns, and it just kept getting ioned. So he just could not take 2 actions, and so he was stuck kind of at the backboard edge. And so he was stuck at the backboard edge with his big weapon, essentially. And in a 600 point game, that was 150 points for him. So that really was a lot of points and a lot of firepower too, because it had like his big guns were on that thing, and it couldn't get up close to any of my units because it just had those two over there shooting at it. But yeah, it was a whole lot of fun, and hopefully we get to do it again soon. And I think over the course of several games, it'll definitely start building up that veteran rank on those units. So it'll be a lot of fun once those upgrades start coming in and we get to kind of make more of a big deal about the names of the units and all, because this was the first game, so none of them were really special yet. But that's all the time we have for today, so I'll continue this tomorrow. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I actually did not record one last week, so it's the first full week I've missed one. Oh, but I was sick part of the week and stressed the rest of it. It was a bit of a busy week, and just so many different things, but luckily it all got better, and it was really nice because I was genuinely not feeling good, and my wife and daughter caught the cold that I had too, but it was nice because I took an afternoon off because I wasn't feeling good, and it really helped just to relax for a little bit and sit down and just be still and take a good little nap and get back up and going, which I think really that's something I feel like I need almost every week, really. And I wish that the workday was not 8 hours, 5 days a week. I know that that's actually low for a lot of places, but I really think that in America we have overcommitted to working full time as a good thing and are really undervaluing the contributions of people in the workplace. Because I tell you what, I do not think that if I worked 8 hours less a week, like I would get quite a bit less work done, but the business would not suffer at all. And if they just hired one extra person for every few people, like for every 4 people, hire one extra person, and then everybody works one less day a week, I think all the employees would be happier and healthier, And on top of that, I really do think that they would make more money, if not the same, because having 8 extra hours does not translate to an extra fifth of work exactly. And I think having an extra person on the team, even though the same man hours are being applied, would divide up the work in such a way that it would actually flow even smoother. Because I know that as far as like the work I do, if we if I had a little less work, it wouldn't. Like, there are certain things that just would not suffer, but you could take away one aspect of my job, and if you just took away that one part of it and gave it to somebody else, that would save the same amount of time as it would take to give me an extra day off every week. So pretty much I spend 8 hours a week on average doing that one thing. And then somebody else could do it. And if that was all they did, it would not take them that same amount of time that it saved from me. Because I really think that having so many different activities and just jobs to do every single day breaks up the work. Because I try to separate my work as much as I can into like segments. So I try and do all of all tasks that are similar at once, so I don't have to go through and reopen 10 different spreadsheets every time I try and do something. And if I could just do every single thing in a row for an entire week, if I could do all of the reconciliations for the entire week in one day, then it would take less time than if I did the entire week's reconciliations across 5 days. But my bosses, for some reason, don't want to reconcile every 5 days, even though we only get 1 or 2 transactions per day. Like, instead of reconciling once a week and it taking 20 minutes, they want to reconcile 5 times a week and each one takes 10 minutes because it takes 5 minutes just to get everything opened and ready, and then another 5 minutes to reconcile. And I really think it'd take 15 minutes to do it all at once, which actually I was so far behind on different things that actually did take me, like I reconciled 10 days worth of transactions today, and it only took me about 15 minutes, but it takes me at least 10 minutes every single day to do it when I do them daily. And so it's really, yeah, like, it was more like 8 minutes to open everything, and then 2 minutes a day, or 1 to 2 minutes a day, depending. But just if I could do more stuff at once combined, I would spend less time on everything individually. But they really want everything to be done every single day. And so that actually makes a lot of time waste happen. And then they get mad because we don't have everything done when they won't let us do everything quickly. They want it all done in more steps than are necessary. Especially we get this big bunch of transactions that we have to break out and reconcile every month, and that takes a very long time. And that's on a normal month, that's probably the biggest chunk of work that I do. But if we just had a tiny bit of automation that's already available, and if they would just trust that we knew what we were doing, we could get it done in 5 hours instead of 20. But it would take trusting an automated entry into the system, and can't have that. So we end up with ridiculously long tasks just because they don't trust us to do our jobs right. And they want it done a very particular way with very particular instructions that really just hurt the process and make it take longer. But oh well, they keep paying me for it. So anyway, I feel kind of bad about just doing nothing but complain for the first 10 minutes of this podcast. But anyway, over the weekend I was watching some YouTube videos and started watching the old Lego Star Wars, the complete saga video game. Some people playing that on YouTube. And I remembered how fun that was. So I started playing that because it's available for streaming on PlayStation with the PlayStation Plus. So I started playing that again, and it's a lot of fun. I like it a lot better than the new one. I'm trying to 100% complete it. I'm going to see if I can do that again. Because like 2 years ago, I think, I 100%ed the game. And it was a lot of fun. But I think that now I'm going to try it again. But for some reason, it is a lot more fun to me than the newer one. And I don't really know why. Because the newer one, Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, it, by all accounts, should be better. Because it's a lot newer, it's got more updated graphics, it has a much more complex combat system, but it's still just as easy to learn, and it's got more just like everything's updated in a way that should be better, and if you look at each one individually, they are all better. But something about it feels worse. And it's like hard to pinpoint why. And I really don't know why, but just something about it just doesn't capture the joy of the old one. And it's not just nostalgia. At least I don't think it's just nostalgia. But there's just something in the core kind of gameplay loop that feels unsatisfying in the new one, whereas in the old one it was very satisfying. I think it's the open world aspect of it just does not mesh well with the whole game. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today. So I'll continue this tomorrow with part 2. Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of this week's episode. Oh boy, it was a bit of a busy day, but not too bad. I was thinking yesterday, I was wanting to originally talk about, I talked about it a little bit, but just the differences between the Lego Star Wars games, new versus old. Because it is weird to me that the new one does not feel as good as the old one, even though I do think that the graphics are better. I guess this is an impromptu review of Lego Star Wars in comparison between the old and the new ones. But the new one, the combat, I don't know, there's just kind of a weird. The shooting combat feels great because you actually like aim down the gun, you can hide behind cover, and it blocks shots. There's like grenades that you have to dodge. That actually is a bit more fun, especially going back to the old one when you're just kind of randomly firing. And then the newer puzzles are they're more interesting. The problem is they're so telegraphed that it takes absolutely no effort to solve the puzzle. You just have to go through the motions of completing the actual puzzle. It's like you see 4 pictures that are very clearly labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 4 squares labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 empty spaces on the ground labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. But then they're mixed up and you have to put them in the right order. And it's like that level of simple. But the way they're like the puzzles themselves, if they didn't give you the answer so easily, would be way more fun than the original game. But the thing is, the original game, the puzzles are not quite as interesting. They're more basic. So like in the new game, one is like you have to you have to put a battery in a slot to shot Captain Phasma to get her to open the door so you can progress, or something like that. And like you have to go and find the battery and then bring it back and then lure her into the trap. And like that is great. The problem is the entire time it's happening, you are getting tooltips that tell you exactly what to do next. So there's not actually a puzzle, it's just a list of tasks that you have to do. And in the old game, it is like, oh, you just have to hit these buttons in this order, but you have to like go and find a vehicle to run over the buttons fast enough, or you have to get this color combination on these dials, but one is over here, one's over there, and one's in the middle. And you have to like go find them and then come back and use the force to twist them. And so it's basic, just like a color match. It's that simple. But the idea behind it of going to different parts of the level, and like you have to explore the level essentially to find where you're going and to find the information you need, and then it ends up forcing a lot more interaction, and you actually have to look at what's around you rather than getting it highlighted for you every time you go to do something. So it's a weird kind of balance between the two that I think you need to find, where you have the more interesting and less blatantly obvious puzzles, but then don't give hints unless you specifically work to activate them, essentially. And I guess there might be a setting in the new game where you can deactivate hints, but I feel like it should be default deactivated. Because, like, the youngest kid that's going to play most people playing that game are going to be 12 plus, which is well old enough to find anything in those puzzles you need. Like, you don't got to be a rocket scientist. And I guess they are worried people would get too frustrated, so they leave tooltips on so that you have to disable them yourself, and so you can't blame them when you get frustrated. But I think that's just one example of it. Is the old one was limited by technology. The new one is like they chose specifically to do things in a suboptimal way just because they were worried about something, it feels like, or they were going for something else. And so, like, the graphics of the new one are great, but and the old one's graphics are somewhat lacking, but it was good for the time, and the new one is also good for the time, and the Legos look great. The problem is the animations do not look like Legos anymore. They're way too fluid, and they just move like cartoon characters, not like Lego people. And like something they did great with the Lego movie is they actually made it look as if it could have been done using stop motion. And I think that that's something that the old Lego games captured pretty well, is they did have some unnatural or un-Lego movement where like the characters twist their torso to look at something or like stretch or bend, but they were overall just a little more rigid, and the new ones feel way too bendy to be Legos. And so like that's one thing they updated, the graphics and the animation, but the animation was already where it needed to be. That didn't need updating. And then the shit, like the builds, I will say on the new one are much better because they are all like they all look like completely 100% real Lego builds, and the environments seem more Lego. Whereas the old one, the environments were mostly just kind of static objects that were not even the best painted, and then there were Lego pieces around, and you use the Lego pieces to build stuff, but not all the builds were even what actual Legos look like. So the new one is a lot better on the Legos, the non-character Legos. But then I think just the kind of level format on the new one, I talked a lot about this the last segment, but the open world really tears down the story-driven format. Because when you're in the middle of travel, like when you just finish the Battle of Hoth, and then you get in your X-Wing and go to Dagobah, suddenly you have 5 different side quests pop up, and then you kind of want to do those, and you fly around for a little bit, and it just doesn't add anything to fly between the planets yourself that a cutscene wouldn't do. But it does kind of take you out of the story. And I think the open world could be a great idea for free play once you've completed the story. That could really open it up, but the story mode should not be in the open world. And I think that's a problem with a whole lot of modern games, is they just try to force these other kind of they try and force these gameplay mechanics into games that they're not made for. And so like a lot of people like tried to do the battle royale when that was popular like 8 years ago. That got so popular overnight, and then everybody tried to put it in their game even when it made no sense at all, and it just ended up flopping a lot of the time because that's not something you can just make in your game. You need to have a kind of structure around that kind of gameplay. You need to make a battle royale game, not put battle royale in your story game. That just doesn't make sense at all. So, and I think the same with like, another thing Fortnite popularized was the building mechanics, just rapid building to kind of create terrain and obstacles. It provides a more interactive world in some ways, especially when it comes to like firefights and shooting, because then it gives you cover and you can make any location a good location to fight, and it speeds up gameplay. But that does not make sense in most games and just kind of takes you out of it when you are playing a super realistic World War II simulator, and then suddenly your character pulls out bricks and starts building a wall in the middle of a forest, and you're just like, no, that's not what this is about. And I think that the open world aspect of the new Lego Star Wars game did that for the story. It could be great outside of the story mode in free play, letting you run around the galaxy and explore. But having that kind of having these cutscenes, and then you have to run for 5 minutes to get to the next cutscene, and there might be some stormtroopers in your path, or there might be a TIE fighter that intercepts you on the way. Just does not feel like you're in the Star Wars galaxy. That feels like they kind of shoehorned in the open world mechanic when they really should have just done a very on rails story and then let you explore outside of that later, like the original did, which the original was on rails even in free play because you still had to play through the same exact level of story, but there were extra areas you couldn't normally get to and things like that to explore more. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today, so I'll continue this tomorrow. Hello and welcome back to part 3 of this week's podcast. Well, my throat was hurting a little, so I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do one today, but it started feeling better. I think what happened is I just got to squeeze by quick. All right. What happened is on Monday night this week, it was so cute. My daughter just decided that she wanted to sleep in her own bed. And so we put her to bed in there, but we've been letting her sleep in our bed for a long time because she was just really not transitioning to her bed at all. And it was getting to be real difficult, and we were losing too much sleep just moving her back and forth, and she was getting big enough she could get out of bed, and it was just causing more issues. So we decided to just hold off on it for a while until thought it was a better time, and then she just decided on her own time that she was ready to start sleeping in her own bed. But of course, that did still end up with her sleeping in our bed for a bit of the night. But she is, so now it's been 2 nights that she's been transitioning, and last night didn't go quite as well, and so, and then of course the first night I was a little more worried about her, and so it just ended up haven't really had much sleep, and I mean still had 6.5 hours, but I'm usually getting closer to 8, 7.5 to 8, so not as many as I'm used to getting. And then first night was only like 5.75 hours, maybe. Was not as much sleep as I need, but we also, on top of that, I moved the humidifier that we have into her room to help her sleep better, and I did not move it back into our room when we moved her back. So the air was much drier than it has been, but but my throat doesn't feel bad anymore, really. It just kind of felt a tiny bit sore this morning more. But I was thinking more about continuing on the subject of the Lego Star Wars games. I was thinking just trying to pinpoint like the other differences there are between the two and how they interact. And I think that the camera, weirdly enough, in the newer ones, the camera follows you really well, but it tends to kind of zoom in a little further. Whereas in the old games, the camera was zoomed out a little more, but it was kind of hard to tell where exactly you are in the level at some points. Like, especially if you're trying to balance on a small object, it can be difficult to figure out exactly where you need to be on the screen. And it doesn't help that hitboxes are sometimes inexact with the visual model. But so it just kind of was not amazing, but the fixed camera, or like relatively off camera, was a much different feel than a more over the shoulder camera that you get with the newer games, which puts you more in it, but it lets you see less of the level. And that's one problem I did find when I was playing through the newer game, is that a lot of times it kind of felt a little too zoomed in and I couldn't really see what was happening in other parts of the level. And I just felt like it was a little less open than the original one because of that. And even when there was much more open areas, they felt a little more constrained because the camera motion was not translating well. And like, if you were in a small area, your character was just as close to the camera as if you were in a wide open area. And not necessarily a more dynamic camera would have been better, but just, I think a different camera style would have fit the gameplay better. But I think that the reason they did that over the shoulder kind of style on the camera more is because of the updated combat, which requires aiming your gun. And it shifts the camera when you aim, but it's not exactly, uh, but it goes still into a more combat focused camera, even when you're not aiming. And even when you're like using a lightsaber or some other melee character. And then the use of health bars versus the hearts of the original game, which playing through the originals, the hearts are a little annoying just because it's like, oh, I just take a heart of damage, but then you just chase around these little hearts that the enemies drop to heal. Whereas in the new one, you heal over time if you're not taking damage, which is much better for gameplay because you aren't like, oh, I only have one heart, so I'm going to die the second I run into this group of enemies. I better try and do this. Oh, it didn't work. But with the newer one, it doesn't feel as Lego to have a little health bar show up. Like, something about it just doesn't quite have the charm that it used to. And like maybe you could add more hearts so that there's more of a variable amount of HP and do something like that, but or just have the hearts regenerate over time. Somebody really doesn't know what they're doing driving. Anyway, uh, but yeah, just that kind of, I think that overall modernization of the combat and health systems loses a lot of the charm of the original Lego games, even though objectively the combat is more fluid and better at like really getting into it, more skill based, not just random, and like you can go through combat without dying much easier, but it still takes a certain amount of skill to get it done. But I still feel like the old one, even though it's a much less robust combat system, just kind of captures the feeling of playing with Legos more than the new one, which feels like you're playing a Lego themed game rather than playing a game that's simulating playing with your Legos and making up your own stories. I think that's kind of where the new one falls short a lot, is it doesn't capture that feeling you get when you have your Legos there and are playing with them. It feels just like another video game that is themed and dressed up like Lego Star Wars. But the old one really captures that feeling of being 12 years old or 10 years old and sitting there with your Lego sets and getting your little characters out and having them clunkily kind of fight each other and then blowing up a ship and then building a wall here and building your guys little things to play around with. And the new one is just technically such a better game, but they lost that just kind of feeling that they get where you're coming from. It feels overly produced and doesn't feel like you're seeing the love of the toy, and like it doesn't feel as much like Legos. It just feels like another Star Wars game. And I think that's something that probably resulted from Disney's involvement more, because that's a lot of their themes these days. They seem to always be remaking old stuff in a newer style with updated story and graphics. And I think they don't understand that the limiting factors of the older animation or outdated graphics and things was not an issue. It was a benefit to the game because it let you put your imagination into it more. And for a company as founded in the idea of imagination as Disney is, it's kind of sad to see that they've lost that original idea. And now they're just going for newer, bigger, better, brighter, shinier things. But I think that's really where the Lego games differ. Is it used to be, we can't do that much, but we can make a Lego game, and we don't do voice acting, not because it's more funny, but because we just don't have the budget or the time. But that ended up leading into this kind of mumble visual display that was a lot funnier and more iconic than anything they could have done with voice acting. And it's really shows, I think, when you look back at all the things that you used to love as a kid that you feel like they messed up on when they redid them as an adult. What they did was they fixed all the technical issues, but in doing so took away the charm of what made the original so iconic and made it feel so real, not because it looked real, but because you could feel the effort and love that was put into the stories more. And I think that's what's missing in the new ones, is they've just made it so perfect that it feels robotic. Because the stories aren't perfect, and I think that's a big part of Star Wars, is the scuffed up ships. But making it perfect takes away from what the game is meant to be. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today, so I'll continue this tomorrow. Hello and welcome to part 4 of this here week's podcast. Boy, today felt like a long day, but it was about 30 minutes before my lunch break when one of our customers emailed a bunch of forms to do implementations for payments, and then also emailed us and said they wanted them done next week, and it takes a minimum of 3 weeks. And with the hundreds that we've already been doing, it's probably going to take a minimum of 6 weeks to get them done, realistically. And they said, oh, we need them next week. So I already know we're never going to be able to get them done that fast. But then my bosses wanted to rush them out so that we could get them done as soon as possible, just in case. And so I delayed my lunch by an hour just to submit them probably an hour earlier. Just made up an arbitrary timeline of, oh, they need to be done by 1 o'clock, which meant that my usual noon lunchtime was not going to work. So I just I did as many as I could real fast, but we didn't get them all done. of course, because that's a completely unrealistic timeline. And then I just ended up going to lunch late for no real reason. Oh, and then there were two more, made me stay 5 minutes late after to get done, but those are not even going to be seen until tomorrow, so that didn't help at all. But it's just one of those great things about work. Sometimes you can have absolutely no reason and still have to end up working extra. But enough complaining about that. I feel a lot better. Well, I feel about the same as I did yesterday. Yesterday, my throat was hurting, and I had a headache and a little bit of body aches, maybe a little bit of chills toward the end of the night. But this morning, I woke up feeling achy and like I had a sore throat. But that sore throat went away, and I still feel achy and just sluggish, like I have a cold or something, but I'm not feeling too bad, so I think I'll be fine. I was trying not to give it to my wife or daughter, but they both seem to have gotten a couple symptoms of it. So we'll have to see. Hopefully we're all feeling good tomorrow, though. But anyway, back to what I've been talking about this whole week's episode. Just going back to Lego Star Wars, because I haven't actually played it this week yet, but either of them. But I feel like it is such a good example of what the modern feel has become for so many things like that. And I was going on and on yesterday about how that's like all throughout Disney's new media, and I definitely think that's the case, but I think it's just also partially to do with everything being decided by investor board meetings, essentially, and everything these days in media, whether that's video games, movies, TV shows, all of it, is just being created for the sole purpose of making money. Like, there's not any heart put into movies anymore. You don't get those movies that some guy's been trying to make for the past 20 years and finally got enough support to make this movie that's been his life's dream or anything like that. You just have super basic movies that are written by like 500 different people and then brought to a board meeting where they cut half of the movie out so that it hits all the right beats at the right time and they don't have to worry about any potentially controversial material, and then is all just super corporate, planned out ahead of time and built from the top down. And it's not about the story anymore. It's not about, I think movies have stopped being art to a certain extent, and video games are starting to get to that point too, where it's no longer a form of creative outlet. It's just a form of media merchandise. And it's turned more into that idea of a product than some kind of thing that is worth doing on its own account. It's only worth the money that you get out of it these days. And that's always been the driver for like video games and movies and stuff, but that's been the driver for the industry as a whole. But there's been a lot of individuals who really just put passion into that work and are trying to do something with it other than make a few bucks. And I think in video gaming, that's still alive and well in smaller, like indie studios. Because, I mean, this year there were some very good video games that came out, and really like well praised video games. Like Silk Song just came out recently, and everyone's absolutely crazy about it because it is all of that people are wanting. And one of the big things with that game is they actually specifically lowered the price point so that they could let more people play it, and went out of their way to make it more widely available and cheaper just to reach more people. And I think that ended up probably making them the same, if not more money. And so I think it's kind of showing that when you really do, there's still room in media for people to have that passion, and really keep doing these projects that aren't just about making money. Because, I mean, they made millions and millions of dollars on Silk Song. But that's because of the reception to it. If it had not been a good game, and if they had just kind of produced it in 2 years with a team of 40 people instead, well, I don't know how many people they had. They might have had more than that, but I know that game had a small team relative to other games that were big titles this year, and took a very long time to develop because they put a lot of work and effort into it, whereas a lot of these games are getting out one a year, or trying to get them out as often as possible, thinking that it's just that initial big revenue spike that matters. But if more people would just put in a lot more time instead of trying to get immediate revenue and look more long-term success, it would be a lot easier to get these passion projects done. But that's all the time we have for now, so I'll continue this tomorrow. Hello, and welcome to part 5 of this week's podcast. Oh, long day, but not really feeling like talking about it too much. Suffice to say, it went about like it's been going, with more work and less time than ever. But back to Lego Star Wars, because I finally got around to playing it again last night for a little bit. And that kind of reminded me of one thing about it, is it comes back to the open world way that it's been done in the newer one, but the newer one has more collectibles, but the collectibles are mostly in the open world kind of free roam areas. And so that kind of means that you end up doing a lot of the same. You don't replay the levels. Like, the levels are not that long anyway, but then you don't even go back to replay them hardly, because you don't really need to search through them for the secrets. All the secret things you're trying to find are out and about in the open world, which, like, kind of seems like it would be better, but there's something about being able to kind of go through methodically a level and do everything in it that's very fun. And with the newer one, you just don't really get that feeling as much, because it's all just kind of shotgunned all over the place, and it's got a weird kind of combination of linear storytelling with an open world that does not work great. I think that's always kind of been a bit of a struggle with open world games, is the cohesiveness of the story. Because some of the great open world games are Bethesda games. The ones I've played the most are Fallout 4 and Skyrim, Elder Scrolls 5. But those both suffer from the open world aspect when it comes to their narrative story. Fallout 4 a little less so, but what inevitably ends up happening is you're going from place to place trying to hit these story beats, and you get distracted and you start doing something else. And before you know it, it's been 20 hours of side quests and you have no idea what's going on in the main story. Then suddenly, like, your son is there, but he's an old man. Sorry, spoilers for Fallout 4. But yeah, suddenly your son is there and he's an old man and you don't really remember what exactly was going on. And it really just kind of makes the story less cohesive, which in those games isn't that big of a deal, because those games are not about the story. Like, the story is a nice, fun narrative that gives you a direction and introduces you to the world and lets you unlock new things through it and kind of gives the game some form of purpose. But without the main story, those games would still be very fun to play. And I think that's kind of where the open world needs to be aimed at. Because open world is just going to be distractions from the story. Like, if you want to have a story-based game, then you really need to not do open world, or at least not fully open world. And you need to have some sections where it's a very linear, even on rails somewhat design. That way you can make those choices. But I think that with the new Lego Star Wars game, there doesn't feel like as much cohesion in the narrative, because it's these short little snippets that are just kind of thrown in there after you do things, and because they make you use the open world to travel between even conversations on the story, it kind of ruins the story feel of it in a way. And what ends up happening is that you're going to. I was playing it the other day, the new one, and I started it was in episode 5. And yeah, I started on Hoth, and then it said, okay, go to Dagobah to meet Yoda. And because it's an open world game, it took like 5 minutes of flying, and then I found a side quest, and then it was just like a space battle, I thought. So I started doing the space battle, and then somebody comes up, go to talk to them to get the reward, and then suddenly I have like this objective that I have to carry to the next, or like to Yavin, back to Yavin 4, and so I go like, oh well, I'll just do this real quick, that because I didn't want to have to restart that objective if I broke it by going into the story. So I just jumped over to Yavin 4, but it turns out that's like not the whole quest line essentially, and then I just started getting attacked over and over, and I couldn't just quit and go back to the story because it was like through a weird kind of mechanic where you do these fights, then jump to hyperspace, then do these fights, then jump to hyperspace. And so I just ended up taking like 30 minutes of random side quest nonsense and traveling back and forth before I got to the next story beat, which really just throws off the story in a massive way that doesn't feel good. What would have been much better, in my opinion, is skipping the open world travel and just having you do the story missions all consecutively, much like the original Lego Star Wars. Because the original Lego Star Wars, it was only story, and you just did it one after another after another. There was some kind of open world-ish stuff where there was the hub world and you chose between levels, but the levels were all parts of the story, and the like mysteries and puzzles and all the stuff you were trying to find for secrets was hidden throughout the story, and you needed to complete the story before unlocking it anyway. So you could just go through the story and it felt much more like a cohesive thing, because there weren't these long periods where you were not in the story's location, at least. And even when you go back in free play and do it completely just looking for secrets, not worrying at all about the like story aspect of it, you still have this sense of cohesiveness between all the rooms and everything, and you're going in a clear path. Whereas in the new one, it feels like you're still meant to follow this story. And even though you know it, so it doesn't really take you out of it that much, it just ruins the whole attitude of it being a fun take on Star Wars, because suddenly you're doing a million other things and just getting thrown about, and then it takes way longer than it really should should to just get from place to place, and it just feels like you're out of the story, and it just takes you out of it completely, and it no longer has that real, like, most good video games, when you get into them, you really get in there with just your mindset and everything, and you start going through them, and you just like get hooked and feel like you're in the game world to some extent, and you're like thinking about next steps and what to do. And I feel like the new Lego Star Wars game kind of just doesn't do that because of the way it's done, and mainly the open world aspect of it, I think, but just the way that the story is super truncated but requires these long intermissions where you're doing non-story objectives. It just doesn't feel like a single thing you're doing. It feels like you're constantly bouncing back and forth. And I guess that's might be something they're going for so people don't get bored. But for me, it does the opposite and makes me not enjoy being able to sit down for hours at a time and just enjoy a good game. It makes me feel like I'm doing 100 mini games. And I think that's really where the push comes to shove on why I don't really like it as much as the old one, but it's still a pretty decent game, even though it costs a little much. But anyways, that's all we have for this week. So thank y'all for listening, and hopefully next week I'll talk about something other than Lego Star Wars.